Have you ever sat at the same table as the people who raised you and realized you were nothing more than an inconvenience to them? Not ignored, not misunderstood, erased. Imagine watching your own parents rewrite your life in front of complete strangers, turning your hard work into a joke, your success into shame, and your existence into an embarrassing family secret. That's exactly what happened to me. And they thought I'd smile, stay quiet, and play along. They had no idea that before the night was over, the very lie they created would destroy everything they had spent years trying to build. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe because today's story proves one powerful truth. The people who underestimate you are often the least prepared for your success. My name is Maya Harris, and for as long as I can remember, my family had already decided who I was. Vanessa was the golden child. I was the backup plan. Actually, scratch that. I wasn't even the backup. I was the family disappointment. At least, that's what everyone believed. Growing up, every achievement of mine was treated like a coincidence, while every ordinary thing Vanessa did was celebrated as if she'd changed the world. When she won a school beauty contest, my parents threw a backyard party for 50 people. When I earned the highest grades in my entire school district, my father simply looked over his newspaper and said, "That's nice." Then he went back to reading. That single moment taught me something I never forgot. In our house, love wasn't unconditional. It had to be earned. And even then, only Vanessa could receive it. Vanessa loved attention. She dressed in designer brands we couldn't afford. She spent hours taking photos for social media, pretending our family lived a luxury lifestyle. Every vacation, every restaurant, every birthday, everything became content. My parents adored it. To them, appearances were everything. They wanted neighbors to envy them. They wanted relatives to gossip about how successful their oldest daughter had become. Reality didn't matter. The illusion did. Meanwhile, I spent my evenings in my bedroom teaching myself programming. While Vanessa practiced makeup tutorials, I built software. While my parents bought her expensive handbags, I watched free coding courses online. Nobody encouraged me. Nobody asked what I was building. Honestly, that became my greatest advantage. When nobody expects anything from you, they stop paying attention. And that's exactly when extraordinary things become possible. I graduated from college nearly 2 years earlier than expected with a degree in computer science. The ceremony should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, there was one empty seat after another where my parents should have been sitting. They never came. Later that evening, I learned why. Vanessa had reached 50,000 followers on social media. My parents had rented a luxury venue to celebrate her influencer milestone. They completely forgot my graduation. Forgot. At least, that's what they claimed. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply stopped expecting anything from them. That was the day I emotionally moved out of the Harris family, years before I physically left. After graduation, I accepted a small entry-level job at a software company. The salary wasn't impressive, but every paycheck had one purpose: saving, learning, building. Every night after work, I stayed awake until 2 or 3 in the morning developing an idea I couldn't stop thinking about. Companies around the country were wasting millions because their shipping systems couldn't communicate efficiently. It was a boring problem. But boring problems often create billion-dollar businesses. For almost 3 years, my life became one endless routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, write code, sleep, repeat. No vacations, no parties, no expensive clothes, just relentless discipline. While my family laughed at my boring computer obsession, I quietly built something that would eventually change my entire future. Eventually, I quit my regular job. When my parents heard the news, they didn't ask why. They didn't ask what I planned to do next. Instead, my mother sighed dramatically and said, I knew this day would come. Maya was never ambitious enough for the real world. My father shook his head. I guess we'll have to support her forever. I almost laughed. Support me? They hadn't paid a single one of my bills since college. But correcting them seemed pointless. Sometimes people believe the version of you that makes them feel superior. So I let them. What they didn't know was that I hadn't quit because I had failed. I'd quit because my startup had just secured its first major investment. And within weeks, everything was about to change. The investment changed everything. Within 6 months, my small software company had grown faster than I had ever imagined. What started as late-night coding sessions in a tiny apartment became Nexus Logistical Systems, a company helping large corporations automate supply chains and reduce millions in operating costs. I hired my first employee, then my second, then 10 more. Soon, investors started calling instead of me chasing them. One venture capital firm purchased a minority stake in my company, valuing the business at nearly $15 million. At 25 years old, I had become a millionaire. But if you looked at my life from the outside, you would never have guessed it. I still drove the same reliable sedan. I still rented a modest apartment. I still bought my clothes from ordinary stores. Not because I couldn't afford more, because I didn't need more. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes it's unbelievably quiet, and I wanted it that way, especially because I knew my family. The moment they discovered I had money, I wouldn't become their daughter. I'd become their personal bank account. So I stayed silent. I let them believe exactly what they wanted. That Maya had failed. That Maya was unemployed. That Maya had no future. It cost me nothing to let them think that. At least, that's what I believed. Until Vanessa announced her engagement. Her fiancé's name was Julian Carter. The Carter family owned one of the largest real estate and logistics corporations in the country. Their business empire stretched across multiple states. Warehouses, shipping fleets, commercial developments, private investments. The kind of wealth most people only read about. Naturally, my parents acted as though Vanessa had won the lottery. For weeks, they couldn't talk about anything else. My mother suddenly became obsessed with expensive wedding magazines. My father started bragging to neighbors about our future billionaire son-in-law. Neither of them seemed interested in whether Vanessa actually loved Julian, only that he'd made Forbes' rich list. Every family dinner became another planning session for a wedding they clearly couldn't afford. Luxury venues, designer dresses, imported flowers, celebrity photographers. My parents were charging everything to credit cards, convinced Julian would eventually cover the costs after the wedding. Watching it unfold felt surreal. They weren't celebrating love. They were celebrating access. Access to wealth, to status, to a life they'd always pretended to have. Then one evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. She almost never called unless she wanted something. "Maya," she said flatly, "you're coming to Vanessa's engagement dinner Friday." I blinked. "Really?" I thought I wasn't invited. There was a long pause. "You weren't." Her honesty almost made me laugh. But Julian saw a family photo and asked why he'd never met Vanessa's sister. "So now you need me. It's only dinner. I'll think about it. You'll come." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Before hanging up, she added one final sentence. "And wear something simple." The next afternoon, she arrived at my apartment carrying a garment bag. She didn't compliment my home. Didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't notice the framed business awards sitting on my bookshelf. She simply dropped the bag onto my couch. "Wear this." Inside was a plain beige dress. Perfectly respectable, but intentionally forgettable. I looked up. "You picked out my clothes?" She folded her arms. "You don't understand how important this dinner is." "I think I understand perfectly." "No, you don't." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If Julian asks what you do, She hesitated, then smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. You tell him you're unemployed. I stared at her. I'm sorry. We've already explained your situation. My situation? That you've been struggling since leaving your job. She said it so casually, as if she'd rehearsed the lie 100 times. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You lied about me. It wasn't a lie. It absolutely was. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, don't be so sensitive. Then came the sentence I'd remember for the rest of my life. A successful daughter is impressive. She paused. But two successful daughters make people ask uncomfortable questions. I frowned. What questions? She smiled. They'll wonder why Vanessa isn't the most accomplished child. For a moment, I couldn't even process her words. She wasn't protecting the family. She was protecting Vanessa. My own mother was asking me to pretend I'd failed, just so my sister could continue being the star. Before leaving, she looked directly into my eyes. Promise me something. What? No stories about computers. No business talk. No technology. No ambition. Smile. Nod. And let Vanessa shine. I slowly zipped the garment bag closed, then smiled politely. Don't worry. I won't embarrass anyone. Her face relaxed. Good. She walked out believing she'd won. She had no idea. I had every intention of keeping that promise. I wasn't going to embarrass them. They were about to do that all by themselves. Friday evening arrived. The engagement dinner was being held at one of the most exclusive five-star restaurants in the city. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. Soft piano music drifted through the dining room. Every table was dressed in white linen, fresh roses, and sparkling candlelight. It was exactly the kind of place my parents loved, not because of the food, but because people could see them there. As I stepped inside wearing the simple beige dress my mother had chosen, I immediately spotted my family. Vanessa was impossible to miss. She wore an expensive designer gown that shimmered under the lights, her enormous diamond engagement ring catching every beam of light as she deliberately rested her hand on the table. She wasn't just wearing the ring. She was advertising it. My mother smiled proudly as guests complimented Vanessa's appearance. My father stood near the entrance greeting everyone as though he owned the restaurant. Then his eyes landed on me. For a split second, his smile disappeared. He quickly walked over. You're late. I arrived exactly on time. He ignored my answer. Remember what your mother told you? I remember. No unnecessary conversations. I know. If Julian asks questions, I'll answer politely. He leaned closer. Not truthfully. His words stung more than I expected. He wasn't asking me to be quiet. He was asking me to erase myself. Again. Dinner began smoothly. Champagne was poured. Expensive appetizers filled the table. Everyone laughed a little louder than necessary. My parents practically competed to impress Julian. My father exaggerated stories about his successful investments. My mother described Vanessa as the heart of our family. Vanessa accepted every compliment like an actress accepting an award. Meanwhile, I might as well have been invisible. Not one person asked how I was doing. Not one person wondered why I had been sitting silently for nearly 40 minutes. Honestly, it felt familiar. Then Julian finally spoke. He wasn't flashy like everyone else. He observed. He listened. He rarely interrupted. When he did speak, everyone paid attention. He turned toward me with a calm smile. So, Maya, right? I nodded. That's right. I've heard surprisingly little about you tonight. Vanessa laughed awkwardly. Oh, there's not much to tell. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Maya's been finding herself. My father chuckled. It's a polite way of saying unemployed. Several guests laughed. I didn't. Julian didn't either. Instead, he kept looking directly at me. So what do you enjoy doing? I opened my mouth, but before a single word came out, I felt familiar fingers wrap tightly around my wrist beneath the table. My mother's grip. Hard. Painfully hard. The message was clear. Stay quiet. My father smiled confidently. Oh, Julian, don't waste your evening talking about Maya. She's never been very ambitious. She spends most of her time sitting at home with computers. We're hoping she eventually finds a simple office job. Vanessa added with a little laugh. Honestly, she's always needed someone to take care of her. More polite laughter echoed around the table. I looked down at my glass of sparkling water. Not because I was embarrassed, because I knew something they didn't. Every lie has an expiration date, and theirs had just expired. The room became strangely quiet. Julian never laughed. He never smiled. Instead, his expression slowly changed. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. Then, shock. He looked at me, then back at my parents, then at Vanessa. Finally, he asked a single question. I'm sorry. Did you just call Maya unemployed? My father laughed confidently. Exactly. She's been living off our generosity for years. She's a good girl, but success simply wasn't in the cards for her. Silence. Julian slowly placed his wine glass on the table. The tiny sound echoed through the dining room. He pushed his chair back. The scraping of wood against marble immediately drew the attention of nearby diners. Vanessa reached for his hand. Julian? He gently pulled away. Without saying another word, he walked around the table, straight toward me. Every conversation inside the restaurant seemed to stop. My parents looked confused. Vanessa looked nervous. I remained seated. Julian stopped beside my chair. For several long seconds, he simply stared at me. Then something happened that no one at that table could have predicted. With complete respect, he extended his hand, and in a clear voice that carried across the silent restaurant, he said, "Good evening, Ems. Maya Harris. It's an honor to finally meet the founder and CEO of Nexus Logistical Systems." The color instantly drained from my mother's face. My father's smile disappeared. Vanessa blinked as if she'd misheard him. The restaurant had gone completely silent, and I knew their perfect little performance had just come to a very painful end. The silence was deafening. My parents stared at Julian as though he had suddenly begun speaking another language. My mother forced a nervous laugh. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Julian didn't even glance at her. His attention remained on me. I've spent the last month reviewing proposals from logistics software companies, he said calmly. Out of every company we evaluated, Nexus Logistical Systems was the clear leader. He smiled politely. I've read your interviews, your white papers, and your company's case studies. I just never expected the woman behind that company to be sitting at this table. Then he turned toward my parents. And I certainly never expected to hear you describe her as unemployed. No one spoke. No one even breathed. My father swallowed hard before forcing another fake smile. There must be another Maya. Julian's expression hardened. There isn't. He pulled out his phone, opened a business article, and placed it on the table. A professional photograph of me appeared on the screen. It had been taken during a technology conference 6 months earlier. There I was, standing confidently on a stage. Behind me was the Nexus company logo. Below the photo was the headline, "Young Tech Founder Revolutionizing Global Supply Chains." Julian looked around the table. This is Maya Harris, the woman sitting in front of you. The CEO whose company my family's corporation recently signed an $8 million contract with. My mother's face turned ghost white. Vanessa leaned forward, staring at the screen as if it might suddenly change. That's impossible, she whispered. I finally broke my silence. No, I said quietly. It's simply inconvenient. My father tried to recover. Maya, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? I couldn't help laughing. Not loudly. Just enough for everyone to hear the disbelief in my voice. You never asked. The words landed like a hammer. You never asked what I was building. You never asked why I left my job. You never asked how I paid my rent. You already decided who I was. So I let you believe it. My mother reached for my hand. Maya, darling. I gently pulled it away. No, you don't get to call me darling now. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. We're your parents. I nodded. Exactly. And somehow complete strangers have shown me more respect than you ever did. Vanessa suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. She pointed directly at me. If she's really so successful, why does she dress like that? The restaurant became even quieter. I smiled. Because I'm trying to build wealth, not advertise it. A few nearby diners chuckled. Vanessa's face turned bright red. Julian looked at her with visible disappointment. So that's what matters to you? The clothes? The labels? The money? Vanessa hesitated. That's not what I meant. Really? Julian replied. Because your sister spent years building a company from nothing. And the only thing you've asked about is her outfit. He slowly removed his engagement ring. The movement was so calm, so deliberate, that everyone at the table froze. Vanessa's eyes widened. Julian. No. He placed the ring carefully on the table. I've spent months believing I was marrying someone who valued honesty, family, and integrity. He looked around the table. Instead, I found a family willing to humiliate their own daughter just to impress wealthy people. Then he looked directly at Vanessa. And that tells me everything I need to know. Without another word, he walked away. Vanessa called after him. He never looked back. The following week was absolute chaos. The engagement made headlines in local society magazines. Its cancellation spread even faster. Luxury vendors demanded payment. Wedding deposits were non-refundable. Credit card companies began calling. My parents suddenly found themselves drowning in debt. Then, my phone started ringing. Again, and again, and again. My mother, my father, Vanessa, uncles, aunts, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Every voicemail sounded almost identical. Maya, we're family. We made mistakes. We need your help. You have enough money. Family should forgive. Funny. When they thought I had nothing, family didn't matter. Now that they believed I could solve their problems, family suddenly became everything. I never answered. Instead, I blocked every number, one by one. A month later, I moved my company into a beautiful glass headquarters overlooking the city skyline. As I stood in my new office on the top floor, I looked out across the buildings below. Not with pride, with peace. For years I had believed something was wrong with me because I couldn't earn my family's approval. Eventually I realized the truth. Their approval had never depended on my character, only on how useful I was to their image. The day I stopped chasing validation was the day I finally became free. Success didn't change me. It revealed everyone else. A few months later, I received one final email from my mother. It contained only one sentence. Can we please be a family again? I stared at the message for several minutes. Then I quietly closed it without replying. Some bridges aren't destroyed by one argument. They're destroyed by years of disrespect. And rebuilding them requires something far more valuable than apologies. It requires trust. Trust they had broken long before that dinner. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate is exhausting. I simply wished them well, from a distance. Because sometimes the strongest form of self-respect isn't proving people wrong. It's refusing to let them keep rewriting your story. And as I looked out over the city that evening, I smiled not because I had become successful, but because, for the very first time in my life, I finally understood my worth.